Could we have roll call, please?
Iverson.
Yes.
Schatzinger.
Here.
Reamer.
Here.
Gallops.
Here.
Denkert.
Here.
Gotsky.
Here.
Sorensen.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and
for the clergy who's not here. Heavenly Father, we gather here today to serve our community with wisdom and compassion. Guide our discussions and decisions that they may reflect the best interests of all residents in Ripon. May our hearts be open and our spirits united. Our city. Amen.
All right. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda. I'll second.
Motion by Doug, second by Steve. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're approved. It's time for public comment. This is the opportunity for citizens to come before the council with comments and concerns on any current city issue, knowing no action may be taken tonight. I ask that you keep it civil and respectful and within 5 minutes. However, discussion of personnel or individual members of the common council shall not be permitted. I expect you to be respectful, and in return, I expect the council to treat the citizens with the same respect. Before you begin, please state your full name and address for the record. First, we have, is it Steve Hepp?
Steve Hopp, W12800 Oak Mountain Road, Brandon. I'm president of the Country Roads ATV Club. I'm here tonight at the request of the residents who are requesting that we change the hours so that they work. Many of the businesses open at 5 a.m. and they'd like to ride their machines to work. Many businesses close at 11 at night. They would be able to get home before midnight. So I'm just here to answer the questions that you have as we get into that discussion.
All right, thank you. Next is John Ernst.
John Ernst, 550 Ardmore. You all know why I'm here. You guys know what my thoughts are. We submitted the proposal to extend the hours from 4:30 to midnight for ATVs and UTVs. Obviously, you guys all know what our thoughts are. I did do some research. I contacted 5 of the largest companies in Ripon and asked what their main life shifts were. Obviously, some of them were a little bit different from, certain shifts, but I just concentrated on their main line. First shifts started, a lot of them start at 5 a.m. Two of the largest ones, Walsworth and Alliance, start at 5 a.m. The second shifts tend to be done at 11, so we want them to be able to get to work, second shift to be able to get home from work. So then for that company, the third shift would be able to go to and from work and home. Obviously, we would like this to be extended. If we could keep it, we would like to keep it universal across the other cities. To go to and from certain cities. I've talked to some who have stated it kind of stinks when they have to go through Rosendale to Green Lake. They have to go around the city. Just be easier to go right through. Obviously, it'd also be safer. So making this universal, less confusion. Again, I hope you guys can look into this, and Steve and I can answer any questions, but hoping we can improve this already beneficial ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving into our first agenda item, the 2023 City of Ripon Financial Audit Report. We have a representative from CLA here, and you should all have a report on your desk.
You didn't bring it.
Hopefully this good?
Yep.
Here, perfect. Adam, you gonna click through?
I can click through.
Awesome,
Tell
perfect.
me when you want me to start. Let me see here. I gotta get to.
I think most familiar faces, but in case there's some new ones, my name is Amber Juriski, a principal with CLA, and perform the financial audit. So if you have any questions during, feel free to interrupt. Otherwise, Adam, Mandy, they all have my contact information. Would be happy to answer anything after. If you go through to the next one as well. So
Do you want us to start on?
I'm going to actually go off of this, but I'll reference the document that this will be in. So the required communications is in would be this like little thicker stapled document, which is the governance communication that we're required to provide. And that summary will say, our responsibility as auditors is to perform an audit under generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards. Management is responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements. So we issue that opinion. We did issue a clean, unmodified opinion. So as part of that, we also review the internal controls of the city. We would not issue an opinion on the internal controls, but we would be required to disclose any findings or non-compliance. And I have a different slide with that on there. An important piece is that in our independent auditor's report, it'll mention the basis for our opinion. We use risk-based approach, materiality thresholds, inquiry with the city personnel, et cetera, to determine what our testing samples are going to be. The next section here on the slide is significant accounting policies. There were no new accounting policies implemented for 2023. However, GASB statement number 96 was applicable. So we reviewed that. GASB statement number 96 relates to subscription-based softwares. In 2022, it was leases, very similar, but there were no subscription-based softwares that were applicable to the city for us to incorporate into the financial statements. If you go to the next slide, continuing on within that governance communication, there are some estimates that we do include within the financial statements. They are low-risk estimates, so they are not broke out and disclosed, but they would include depreciation, your proportionate share in the Wisconsin retirement system, your proportionate share in it's called the LRIF, but the state life insurance program, and then your compensated absences. There were no disagreements with management, and management did take responsibility for the financial statements by signing the management representation letter, which is attached to the back of that thicker stapled document. No difficulties encountered in performing the audit. City personnel, very responsive, very helpful. There's a lot, and there's still a number of newer people learning, and they've done a really, really nice job, and I want to make sure that I mention the strides that have happened over the last year and a half, because I think that's very important to notice. So, corrected misstatements, we did have some material adjustments that we included. I would say pretty standard for a city your size and the staffing levels and things like that, and the complexities that you have. Most of those journal entries related to the proportionate share in the Wisconsin retirement system and the life insurance program, capital assets, which I'll talk about in a little bit. We did have adjustments to cash as it related to a separate CDBG account, library cash as it related to the community foundation, and the cost to market on the adjustments. So within the financial statements, if you're reading the thick bound document at any point, you'll see a prior period adjustment. That is relating to cash that was previously not on the books that we have now since put on the books. So that is what that refers to. And then various recording of additional receivables and payables on the books. Those journal entries are all sent to the city to review and approve and go through, ask any questions, and we would provide any documentation. Uncorrected misstatements. This means, it sounds way worse than what it actually is, but it means it exceeds a threshold that we have to disclose to governance, but it's not material to the statements. So there was one uncorrected misstatement, and that related to a leased asset and payable, where it was not material to the financial statements, and so we passed on the adjustment. That's what that's called. And as I mentioned, an unmodified clean opinion on the financial statements. So as part of that, I mentioned the internal controls, and we review them, but we don't issue an opinion. So we had two findings, no non-compliance, but we had two findings. One, the preparation of the annual financial report, meaning we prepared the document. We prepare probably 95% of our clients' financial statements, just because of the complexities with disclosures and so forth, a convenience piece. The expectation is the city reviews those thoroughly and approves those with the signing of the management rep letter. Same with the adjustments to the city's financial records, as I mentioned. That means that we made those material adjustments that I just had gone through. So this piece is very small, so I'm gonna go, what I really wanna pull out of here is the change in fund balance of about 57,000, if I can read that right, if I remember correctly. So the total general fund balance was about, if you go to the next slide actually, Adam.
Does it help for you to see this? Do you want to see my copy?
I have this one, but I didn't know if you guys could see it, so.
Okay.
But if you have your copy. So your total general fund balance is about 2.1 million. And actually, Adam, I'm gonna skip out of order here. Can you hit tab again, right here? Oop, right there. So if you go to your, I believe that's page 9 of your PowerPoint. Yep. So the total general fund balance is about 2.2 million, just shy of 2.2 million. Your total unassigned fund balance is about 1.4 million. So you have approximately 353,000 in non-spendable, or 358,000 in non-spendable, and about 370,000 in assigned fund balance, leaving that 1.4 million. If you go back one slide now, so what does that mean? We like to use the unassigned fund balance as a metric for financial health. So the recommendation that, from an industry perspective, and that we'd like to talk about, is anywhere from about 20 to 35% of your expenditures, depending upon your cash flow. Meaning, are you very heavy in the state aids or the property taxes, and when's the timing of those collections coming in? Because that unassigned fund balance is kind of like our own personal rainy day fund. Your 3 to 6 months of living expenses. That's what this is very comparable to. So your total fund balance policy that the city has is about 20%, and that's equal to about 1.2 million. You're just over that. It's, I think if I remember correctly, about 23%. So you're right within that range. What I want to just make sure that you remember is, as you go into budget season, if you're using fund balance to balance your budget, or if you're using fund balance for reoccurring operational costs, that will eat this down. And just make sure that depending where your cash flow situation is, that's where you're going to determine where your sweet spot of a percentage is. But also keeping in mind, what are my capital projects? What are my maybe one-time operating costs that I need to be able to look forward at that maybe you might need to use that unassigned fund balance for. So this is a very important piece that I like to talk about and make sure that there's a good understanding on that. Then if you go to the next one, so as I mentioned, capital projects.
Can I ask real quick? I mean, so you just said you recommend 20 to 35%, and we're at 23. So I know that you're saying that that's fine, but that's on the low end of fine.
It's on the low end, especially depending upon your cash flow. But the thing here, I would say for the city, that you just want to be careful of is you have a number of other special revenue funds that also already have some pots in them, and you also have this 200 or 370,000 in assigned that's already assigned for specific purposes in the industrial park and then some future capital projects. So that kind of pulls that number down a little bit.
Thanks.
But you want to make sure that you continue to monitor that through your budget process and kind of project where you think where that'll be. So, and then capital projects, so where this does come into play, Jolene, is the capital projects. Your fund balance has basically been used up and it's operating at a deficit fund balance. I believe, if I remember correctly here, we have capital projects of a deficit about 2.7 million. That relates to just a little bit of overspending on projects over the course of time that adds up. So in 2023, there was about $125,000 in property tax levy that went into the capital project fund. That 125, it makes a difference, but 2.6 build that deficit fund balance out. That's where maybe looking at that percentage in the general fund, is the general fund going to have to contribute to anything, whether it be in the future or now, and figuring out what that sweet spot percentage is. In the management letter that you have relates to capital asset tracking, and really it's really hard in a city. You guys are small, but yet you're big enough that you have a very decentralized departments from a utility and a public works and those kinds of things, and really kind of bringing that financial piece back in a summary format. That's something that Adam and Amanda and we've talked a lot about, of how do we get some of that information back here to be able to have a really good, create a really good tracking mechanism to minimize that first bullet point there. So that's something that, and I think Ellers is working with the city on some things. I've answered some questions on that, but really kind of narrowing that down and being able to compare your projected budgeted costs, your actual, and compare that back to the general ledger and how those tie together. And there's some ways in the system that the system can help with that as well. So that's going to be the next, I would say the next step to that. The long-range planning, which as I mentioned, so he's already working on some of that, and making sure that we're including the funding sources. The one thing that we found in kind of going through a lot of this is there's different in all of the different funds, donations, in the TIDs and so forth, making sure that those are aligning with the expenditures, so that the revenues and expenditures are offsetting each other, not that there's an expenditure pulling a fund balance down, but a revenue in that piece. If you go to the next one, the tax incremental districts. So TID 5 closed so we're working on a closeout audit there. But in total at December 31st, 2023, million of unreimbursed project costs in total. They're broken down by each individual TID with the termination years, and you can see that some of those are coming up quickly. So just making sure that that you're doing some long-range planning there. Some of those, the negatives, are over-recovered, so that has already been recovered in those regards, specifically 9 and 10 and 12 and 14. So the utilities, the big thing from the utilities perspective is just understanding operating income versus cash flow. And because operating income, if you look at the income statement on the utilities, that doesn't equal cash, because there's depreciation, there's the Wisconsin retirement system and so forth within there, that kind of distorts it. So water had operating cash of about $436,000, with $412 also restricted for debt service that has to be set aside. Wastewater has about 290, ignore that million, I have a typo in there, 291,000. Excuse me.
That's a lot, 91,000 million in cash.
I'm not sure what I was thinking. Auditing my own PowerPoint, wrong. Unrestricted net position for both water and sewer. Water was 562,000 approximately, and sewer 83,000. That unrestricted number is very similar to the unassigned fund balance in the general fund, but it's hard to put a pinpoint on there, because 562,000, if you have to do a major water main replacement's not going to get you very far. So that's where the cash flow and the long-range plan, capital plan, comes into play. Recovering your costs through your rates, that's the other important piece of the utilities, is making sure that the rates are structured to be able to have operations cover your capital and your principal and interest on your debt. Sewer, continuing to evaluate that as time goes on, and you are doing that with your budget process each year, so that's good. Water rates, we just went through the water rate case, and those, Amanda's having fun implementing those right now into the bills. So that you'll start to see over the next couple billing cycles here. The piece that I just want to, I'm going to skip to the, you can actually skip this slide. This is what the cash flow. So if we talk about the cash flow, so wastewater generated about $350,000 from operating, water about $240,000. But the cash used in the water utility from capital and principal and interest was about $620,000. So the utility led to a deficit of $397,000 in the water utility. And wastewater, they have very little principal and interest on their debt, and that was $291,000 from a surplus perspective. That's this page right here.
15, yeah.
Any questions on the utility side? This is just a slide from the water rate of return perspective. As I mentioned, the cash flow and the water rate case that just happened. So your rate of return has been significantly lower than your authorized rate of return. And that the PSC reevaluated and has set it at, I believe it's about 6.3% of an authorized rate of return, and they've projected it based on enough cash flow for your capital projects and your principal and interest. I'm going to kind of just high level, these are more for your information, I just wanted to pull them out, but this is a debt summary for the entire, for the city, both governmental and business type. What I want to kind of go to is the legal margin. So it should be a couple slides, there you go. So I pulled out the entire, all the general obligation debt for the city, and then the legal margin is what I like to look at from a financial health perspective in terms of debt. Where are you in terms of your capacity? So you have $29 million in capacity. The city currently has $10.2 million in outstanding. So you're about 35%. Keep in mind, there's some changes. Act 12 will have some impact on value fluctuation in general. We'll have some fluctuations over the next number of years, so that number can come down, your capacity then comes down. But really kind of looking at that as a percentage about what makes sense for the city. But then also keeping in mind trying to keep general obligation debt out of the utilities as much as possible. The next couple slides has the revenue bonds. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. That's more for informational, just for ease. But if we go to slide 21 here, outside of the numbers, so in 2022, there was GASB Statement 87 that was applicable, the leases. 23 was the subscription-based softwares. And now going forward, and then in 2024, and 2025, you'll have 2 additional GASB standards that could have an impact on the city. So just wanted to make you aware of what those are, and those will be evaluated throughout the year and discussions had. The last slide is the comments and observations. So we talked about the capital asset tracking. And that goes in line with the policies and procedures. Just continuing to evaluate what the current policies and procedures are. Are they written down? What's the internal control in them? The policy is really the policy. The internal control is the procedure. Implementing review and approvals, bank reconciliations, tying out other balance sheet accounts at month end, year end, implementing a review over those, making sure that as technology changes, as people change, that those are continuously evaluated or implemented if they are not currently implemented. So that is what that relates to. The most common things that I would say from a priority standpoint would probably be the bank reconciliation review and journal entry review. In a small office, it's hard, but how can we kind of come up with a way for that review to happen? Those are conversations that we've already had and will continue to have. Uniform guidance, currently last year in '22, the city had a single audit, a federal single audit for exceeding the threshold of federal dollars. You were not in '23. But I wanted to make sure that I just mentioned some of the changes coming here in '24 underneath uniform guidance, which is the single audit. It does increase the threshold to $1 million from $750, but where two pieces that to me matter more is added cybersecurity internal control assessments and requirements. That's good, not just if you're a single audit, just something to consider. I know we've had a number of clients who've had some significant downtime as a result of cyber attacks. But then also there's some procurement policy language changes that are required, and a lot of that revolves around like Title IX type language changes. So looking at your purchasing policy, getting that up to where it should be can be helpful, because you are required, even if you don't meet the threshold, you are still required to comply with uniform guidance. So that's why that's in here. Otherwise, any questions? I know that was a lot.
Yeah, I got a question for you. So what I've gathered from reading the audit itself is that water and wastewater are not making enough money for that 5% threshold. Would that be your assessment?
I don't have wastewaters on me right now, but water is not.
Water is not.
So we did the rate case as
Right, so even with the rate increase, that's going to help, but probably going forward, because we need to be making that 5%. Sorry, people out there that are listening. Sorry, people that are going to read this in the newspaper. Sorry to my wife back home. But I think we're going to have to revisit that again. I believe that we're going to, because we do need to pile up some of that cash. We do have projects coming down in about 5 or 6 years, which we're going to need a lot of money to redo stuff under 23. So just...
Yeah, and the best recommendation I can have for that is, so when the new rates go into effect, they will here now, what I highly recommend is after a year after year, I believe it's a year after your new rates, then you're eligible to start submitting for a simplified rate increase. I highly recommend doing that for as many years as you can. It's about 4.5% right now, is the simplified, what that they'll give you. For a period of time, that wasn't even keeping up with inflation. And the big key that you want that simplified to be able to do is pay for your maintenance costs, your pump replacements, your water tower repaintings, all of those things. And then when you get to your major capital, that's then when you come back out for a conventional. That's what they call a full rate case, the conventional, because that takes into account those significant projects and you can nail those down. But that would be the best recommendation, because you can't, you're stuck by the PSC, so you can't just automatically, but that simplified process is extremely important.
Okay, thank you.
There is, I know that I didn't touch on every fund balance, but there is and on page, there's a summary financial information right after page 4 that lists all of the governmental funds, and it has it broke out. It's in the governance communication in the stapled document. Just for your reference, it summarizes all of them. And just, I guess, a couple points there that we've had extensive discussions on is taxi, a deficit of $302,000, and then there's obviously some discussions on the EMS services, but that's $362,000. Library has about $859,000. Community promotion about $234,000. And donations, we pulled a number of donations out for the some of that got moved to capital projects, but they're down to $132,000. Any other questions?
All right, thank you.
Ask a million questions. I think, so just, there's a few things we should talk about a little bit more here with Amber. But ultimately, we have the audit this year going into the budget, and that is helpful, right? In the previous years, we haven't had the holistic picture of what was going on until after the budget was passed. So having this now allows us to make some better decisions moving forward in tandem with the financial management plan with Ellers, which CLA and Amber have helped kind of work through, and we're pretty much wrapping up. From a general fund side, we seem to be doing okay. But last year there was a recommendation and to talk about 20 to 35% with kind of where the costs are, being at 23% remains at the low end. So from a fund balance perspective, while we're above our policy is a minimum, and we that, but it's very difficult because of some of these other outcomes and negative balances in the funds, okay? We have talked on multiple occasions, and it has led to certain, memos or certain decisions about certain funds. And library fund, there was by an additional
About 300,000.
$300,000, okay? That has been discussed a lot, and there's been a lot of work done there. Remains a point of concern regarding just some of the accounting of that and how it's been handled. So there is a note in the audited financial that there is accounts that were found. We continue to work with the library and the library board on that. But then you see other funds. We talked a lot about taxi. The taxi fund is $300,000 in the hole. There will be some recommendations coming up about that and how we handle that moving forward. That was about $180,000 a couple years ago, and it's always been negative. But it is that remain on kind of a negative path, right? TID 7, TID 11 is stabilizing, and then you have a couple other there that are, very early. And then you have capital project fund. Amber went back with her team and Amanda and reviewed years worth of capital projects to determine when or where have the appropriate amount of funding or came in higher than originally anticipated. And those projects have led to a $2.7 million deficit in the capital fund. Okay? Those projects include projects we had funding for that came in higher than anticipated. So the senior activity center, buying a garbage truck, Vermont Street Parkway Terrace. Okay? So a lot of those projects were done, funding in place. Okay? When you look at some of these projects and moving forward, water and wastewater remain financially not as viable as they should be, and they do not have the funding to contribute to road projects. Okay? So all of this is being looked at and brought forward in a financial management plan and will be discussed further on Wednesday. But these are the conversations that we've been having, and these trends aren't new. These have been happening for years. Okay? And we need to start addressing them, because if they continue to grow in the deficit, particularly the taxi and capital, we will be in a very negative financial position from a general fund perspective. And usually it's opposite. Usually your water and sewer funds have cash, right? And your general fund doesn't have as much. We're sort of opposite. And we do not have the financial capacity today, the things that are going to be expected of us from a capital perspective. So that will come into play with the financial management plan and the budget moving forward. So there's been a lot of conversations about all of these things for the last 3 years. Come together, and the financial management plan, as we've worked through it, brings it all together. So that's not a question, but there's just, these are the conversations that you don't see or hear, and I want to bring them forward because there are some decisions that and recommendations that will need to be made about some of these funds.
And some of those things, I think, there's a couple different pieces that, looking at, the capital projects, for example, a $2.7 million deficit, we can't focus so much on what happened. Let's focus more on how do we prevent that from happening again, and how do we kind of look forward? And that's where some of the pieces of the capital asset tracking, we mentioned the library cash that was determined. Mandy's already put into place a process for recording that activity every month. And I believe I'm meeting with the library board at the end of the month, or in October, just to answer some questions. But changing some of those processes, those policies and procedures can kind of help fine tune some of these smaller items. But to the point that when I mentioned before with the general fund percentage, some of those one-time, the taxi deficit, if the taxi deficit gets bailed out by the general fund, that eats into that. And so there's those one-time, that would be like the one-time operating costs that I'd be referencing. And just making sure that fits where you want to go. If it corrects it, that has to happen, at some point, and it can. And I've seen a number of clients do that and then make a different decision going forward on what that is. But to Adam's point, I think the important thing is having the conversations and being okay with, hey, maybe this didn't work out here, but how do we fix it going forward, or what do we do slightly different? And some of that's hard to tell. You don't see that until you see it on paper with this, or with a financial study. So I think to Adam's point, as you go into your budget season, I think I joked with Adam about a month and a half ago. I said, you have this thing 4 months prior to when you had it last year. I think that's not just the timing of that, but it's the importance of what's in it and how it can help you make some decisions going forward.
I want to piggyback on what Adam was talking about and what Doug had said earlier, is that the two funds, let's just use water and wastewater, are what's known as enterprise funds, which means they need to be self-sustaining by the fees that are charged. It's not tax levy that should be keeping those, excuse the pun, afloat. They should, and that's why, as Doug alluded to, most likely we're going to be seeing increases, because those are supposed to be, as Adam pointed out, separate funds that are funded by a fee base, not levy. And it's a healthier way to do it. I know I'm not looking forward to the increases, but our infrastructure has been deferred for a decade. And that's why you see the need for this. We haven't kept up with the financing of these two things for sure. But water, wastewater, roads, that's all infrastructure. And we have to come up with a plan to address not only maintaining, but repairing infrastructure. And so I just wanted to frame that up just a little bit differently for people at home.
The last full rate case that the water utility had was in 2007, I believe.
That was just before it transferred to city property.
Yeah. So it was, I believe, yeah, 2007, 2009. So it had been that long since there had been a full rate case, which is a long time, especially considering the inflation
Don't
at the
believe there's
time.
been very many simplifieds in there either.
No. Yeah, no.
Like early teens, there was a increase.
I think 2013-ish, about in that time frame. Yeah. So that's where I think my response before is just making sure that now, okay, here we've done this, now how do we do that, to your point? And evaluating, sewer is, the council has control over the sewer rates. So during your budget process, really looking and focusing on that, you can make those rate increases right within that budget process. I have one client that has their projected sewer rate increases built out for the next 15 years. And they just put that in and they'll revise it as they need to go. But that's a perfect time to do it, and you don't have to have anybody else involved in it. You can look at it from a budget perspective. What do we need for this to happen? What's our projected infrastructure need from a debt service? You can do some simple calculations, and you don't need a whole lot of involvement from that. So that's the nice part about wastewater.
Jolene?
My question is, for people staying at home and they're thinking about, their own budgets for themselves or their family, and how can you help me understand why when someone approves a budget for the year, they think, okay, we're moving forward with that, but now suddenly, if there's a change such as, $300,000 in debt, typically, you would bring that to the table, you would review that, and you would find, either you would have to, stop spending in a certain area or find where you're gonna get funds. That's the reality of people's lived experiences. But this is different, and because we're not having sort of an emergency meeting as to how do we stop this. So can you explain maybe a listing why this is different? And to be clear, taxi services, I know of people that use it for medical appointments, for counseling appointments, for, at night if they drank too much to not drive. It literally probably has saved people's lives here. But can you explain that, why we're not looking at this immediately to say what changes need to be made now?
Probably because it hasn't been bad enough from an overall perspective, with that, if it's going negative little by little, right? It's just, the problem now is, I would say it's gonna catch up with us when we have to do more, right? You can only defer things so long before they become a bigger problem. And the bigger problem here is you're kind of starting in the negative in some areas when you also have to move forward to do more. So there are funds covering those deficits, right? It's kind of an accounting thing that gets put out on paper, but ultimately it's still there. And you have to, at some point, make the decision of how far can it go before it becomes a large enough liability that it impacts your ability to do everything else you want to do, right? It's kind of like if you have a credit card with a balance on it and you get cash, do you go on vacation or do you pay off the credit card, right? And at some point, everybody makes those decisions. Here, it's been a trend, and we've made some adjustments. We just haven't made enough, particularly on a revenue side, to keep up with what is expected to do and to invest in. So I don't know if that, you can add whatever, but
I'd like to also answer Jolene's question. We talked about the taxi at length last year. This will be my third budget. We did talk about a $100,000 plus deficit in the taxi last year. It's not that this hasn't been discussed before, it's just that the council chose not to take any action on it. We didn't address it last year. We knew about it, we talked about it.
That's how we talked about it, that when we addressed it, and there was a plan that I thought you actually even brought forward to use funds for it.
We did raise rates last year.
Right.
At the time we raised rates, we said we weren't raising nearly enough to cover the whole.
Right.
We went as far as we could stomach stomach, basically.
Right. So we, as a council, did not take action to stop that continued deficit.
We slowed it a bit.
Yeah, and you can, it's from the slowing, you can, in 2022, the deficit was 308,000. 2023, it was 302. So you lost about 600,000, or 600,000, my goodness, $6,000 in 1 year versus, that
It was 40 to 60 we were losing.
Yeah, it was quite a bit more in the years prior, so it kind of slowed that process. But what happens in that deficit is there's temporary cash advances on page 50 that breaks it out, basically that it comes from the general fund's cash balance from a reporting standpoint. The city doesn't see that on their books, but from a reporting standpoint at year end, the general fund covers that cash deficit, because you can't show negative cash.
Steve?
Many, many years ago, I was on the Transportation Commission, which was the taxi commission, when they just turned over from being independent to the city. We used to get state grants. Are we not getting those anymore?
We get state and federal grants, but they're smaller and smaller every year.
I will talk about this in detail on Wednesday night because there's more detail. This is just an example of one fund that is an example of other funds that are creating a financial liability for the city. It's just an example. And we'll talk about that on Wednesday, what that looks like moving forward among other ones in here.
Does that help? Any other questions? Great questions, great discussion.
So I'll see you on Tuesday,
Next Tuesday, right?
not tomorrow.
Okay, good. I panicked that I had the wrong date. No. I think the big thing, I just want to make sure I say thank you, Adam and Amanda. We've gone through with the water rate case, with the audit, and we've pushed things up with how late last year was and just the timing of new staff, all of those kinds of things. This year went really good. I hope they tell you the same thing, but we appreciate the help there. And I think as we go forward, Adam already said that there's a lot of things already that have been worked on, and I think they'll continue to be in. That'll be hopefully even better, so. And if there's any questions on any of this, feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to answer anything.
Thank you, Amber.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amber. Great information.
See ya.
All right. Moving on, we have first of two open outdoor container entertainment event permit applications. This first one is put forward by Ripon Main Street for Ripon Rhythm and Brews Beer Walk on October 11th, 2024. We have Craig here if anyone has questions for him. This is the second time we're doing this event? Third time. Craig says third. And Craig is here if you have questions, but otherwise, everything's...
I'll make a motion to approve the open container event permit.
I'll second. Motion by John, second by Jonathan.
So clearly there's two. I assume the motion was for the first one. Do you want to be specific right? Okay.
Would you like
For
more?
number two, yes, the first for
Rhythm and Brews.
Rhythm and Brews Beer Walk.
Thank you. Any discussion on the first event permit? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the open outdoor container entertainment event permit application for Rhythm and Brews Beer Walk on October 11th, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That one is approved. Next up, we have the open outdoor container entertainment event permit application, again by Ripon Main Street, for Holiday Wine Walk to be held on November 1st, 2024.
I'll make a motion to approve the holiday wine walk.
Second.
Second.
A motion by Jonathan, second by John. Any discussion on this event? Jolene?
Craig, you always do a great job with this, and I'm so grateful for the one-to-one ratio requirement. For the previous one, it says, there's going to be soda and water available for all participants. And then the one for this one is that you've requested tasting rooms to provide 2 cases of non-alcoholic beverages. So that's on them. And there's no way that it's you as the event attendee can assure that that's happening or help provide though, the participating to make sure that they can have that.
That's a part of the requirement of all of the businesses that sign up to participate in the event. So they're obligated to provide that.
Do you think that we should update the, instead of saying requested, that it is required that tasting rooms provide non-alcoholic? But what you're saying is that that's what's happening in practice and you're willing to stand behind that? And
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Any further questions or discussion? Thank you, Craig. Thank you. All right, all those in favor of approving the outdoor open container entertainment event permit application for the holiday wine walk on November 1st, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That one is approved. Thank you. All right, next we have an appeal for an operator's license. The appeal is put forward by, how do you pronounce the last name?
William Kopsel.
Kopsel, William Kopsel. You have a letter from him in your packet as well as a staff report from Police Department. Bill, would you like to, were you the one that did the denial or is that coming from Naomi?
It's coming from the police department.
Okay.
I think we start with the chief.
So if you'd like to have a seat for just a moment, I'm going to have the chief fill us in on what he found. And just summarize William's letter that he was just coming before you as an appeal, as the police department has denied the application, so.
Yep, so just...
Go ahead. Just for the record, this is set forth in the City of Ripon's policy guidelines for operators licenses that we've had in place for quite some time. And part of this process is someone who feels aggrieved can file for the appeal. That's why he's here this evening. And it starts with the police chief recommending, identifying the denial of the operator's license application and stating on the record what those particulars are. So that's how we're starting to proceed.
Yep, and I'll just reiterate what Attorney Wirtz has said there. So we use guidelines that have been adopted by the City of Ripon whenever we review an application for an operator's license. Those guidelines are standard for every applicant that comes in. We use that same applicant so that we're consistent across the board when we review applications. I think you all have a copy of my letter that I addressed in reference to this particular applicant and in reference to several guidelines that appeared in, that are part of that letter. Rather than, certainly you have the opportunity to read through that. I think it's important that you understand that rather than putting all of that out here. You can certainly look and see, but there's really 3 guidelines here that are affected. Guideline number 4, which is the applicant must truthfully and completely fill out the application. Guideline number 3, which is 2 or more offenses, certain offenses within the last several years. You'll see that there is 2 of those that meet that qualification. And then the first guideline, or guideline number 1 under the guideline, if those violations substantially relate to the license activity, and you see that my explanation there indicates that those criminal offenses occurred during a process in which I believe is related to job licensing issues. So what happens is I review the application, take a look at the guidelines. If they meet the guidelines that are outlined here in my letter, then I don't have a choice but to deny that license because those are the guidelines that we use. As part of that then, the applicant, once they receive that denial, my denial, they have the opportunity to come before you and explain to you why they believe that something shouldn't be in place or that they should have an exception to these guidelines and be granted the license. Any particular questions for me?
I have a question for you. What's the length of time that a person would be denied an operator's license?
1 year.
Just 1 year?
After 1 year, they can reapply.
Okay. And do they have to go through a special assessment to prove that they were doing
Nope, they
anything?
just reapply, complete the application as normally it would be completed.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
I have one, just in general. Anyone with operator's license, there are checks in place, right, that the city does. Like you try to buy underage, like you send someone in, right?
Compliance checks.
So
Yeah.
if they have a license and they fail like a check, you can revoke the license.
Correct.
Okay, just want to make sure I understand.
I do have one question for you. In your report where you asked, do you have any pending arrests or have you been convicted of any as a juvenile or an adult? That question, where he had answered one conviction but not the other three. Is there further language in that question that says in a certain time frame have you been convicted or any time?
Anytime.
Okay.
Anytime.
He works for the BP station. What responsibility does the BP station take with hiring a person like this? Do they,
Well, I'm not sure, and you'll have to ask him about his current employment,
okay,
if, what's going on with that. But it's up to the individual to get an operator's license. So you can have multiple, if you have multiple people within a licensed establishment, so like BP, if there's, you could have one cashier that doesn't have a license, but you have to have somebody with a license on premises at all times when you're selling intoxicants.
Similar to what you see at a grocery store when a minor is checking out
Yep.
someone.
Yep, a lot of times when you
They
go through
call
the.
a supervisor
Yep,
over
they'll
to
say,
check
can
them
I
out.
check them
Or a
out, or can you
festival.
come and verify? And they'll come. So that particular clerk may not have a license, but there has to be a license on premises. So what you tend to see in convenience stores then is that because there may be only one employee there, that employee has to get licensed in order to retain that position or have that position. But I'm not sure what his current employment is. You'll have to ask him about that. Any questions?
We may generate more, but thank you for now. William, if you'd like to step forward. You'd like to just make your case, tell us why we should reconsider this?
Yeah, I know my background history is the reason why I got denied my alcohol license, but that happened almost about 6 years ago, and since then, I haven't been doing anything wrong. I've been working at BP. Took me about 2 years to try to finally get this job. And now I tried the first time ever trying to get a liquor license. I got denied. I'm not denying that because of my background. I'm just hoping that I'd be able to get a liquor license so I can actually do my job because we're short-staffed as it is at BP. And there's only really 3 employees that work there. Right now, we have to call people from other companies, from other Shell, Sickle, and everything to come work for us to cover the shifts, because since I can't be there by myself because I don't have a liquor license, everyone else is working, well, around the clock to try to be there with me so I can continue working, you know. And to make it easier on them, I really would appreciate if I could get my liquor license so I could take the stress off them for work.
Why didn't you tell the truth on the application?
I didn't understand part of the application or what it meant. I was trying to fill it out to the best of my ability, and I didn't know everything what was on my background. I knew the gist of what was on it, and I knew I had a felony, which is why I put it on there. It was my 4th OWI. The other OWIs that are on there, I just found out that they weren't felonies, so I didn't know if I had to put all of them on there, if it was just my felonies. I didn't know if they wanted misdemeanors and
Yeah, they
everything.
want everything.
I did not know that.
Jolene?
First of all, William, I admire you for coming in front of the public like this. That takes courage, and I understand you're asking for this consideration because it sounds like you want to better your life. You want to, not only keep a job that it sounds like is
I'm
important to you,
also
but
help supporting my mom and my family right now because my dad passed away a few years ago, so I'm doing this to help my mom out, pay her bills and everything else,
So, and I know coming in front of us like this, and again, being on, it's not easy. So I admire you for that. I want you to know that. My question for for us here tonight that I have is that if someone is coming before us saying that this is what would help their employer, would it not be helpful to have an employer state that this is what they would like, and do maybe include a statement of how this person is shown, like just like a character reference? Because I just don't understand how we're going to be asked to make a decision for an employer. I mean, if they are short-staffed and this is going to help them, we have the individual consideration right now, but the case is being made that this would help the employer, and we have no statement from the employer. Isn't that strange?
This is his appeal. We have nothing in the guidelines that requires that. Could have he brought his employer in or materials from his employer? Yes, he could. If that's your question. Nothing prevented him from doing it. But the guidelines are clear, and he violated the guidelines, and the recommendation was made. And due process gives an individual an opportunity to be heard. He's here. The question you're asking is advocating for him. He could have done those things. The city is not required to do those things, just for the record.
Because he's saying that
understand your
so
question.
he can continue working. He's not saying, I want this so I can move up. I mean, basically, we have someone coming before us saying an employer in town has threatened to not, and I don't know if that's the case, so I don't want to state that the employer is saying that he's going to lose his job if he can't get this, or is somebody using this because maybe, I hope that you're not still struggling with your addiction, but you can see why we want to put the guardrails in place,
and I
right?
completely understand that.
And so I just don't understand how, I mean, if we're looking at, if you're not needing this for your job, with all due respect, I don't want to approve something because I want to help make sure that the temptation is not there. If you need this for your job and the employer in town is saying, I'm short-staffed, I don't know how to keep my business open, and I'm going to have a good character reference, I mean, maybe I have a different opinion, no?
But I think objectively, I mean, like, not to get off on a tangent, I don't mean that, but so Quick Trip has 75,000 people working every time you go into a Quick Trip. But like BP, like Amico, Holiday, there's generally one person working. So I think objectively, having the people there staffed with a liquor license is what that business would want.
I don't know that if they're not here saying that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, nobody said that, but I feel like if you put yourself in the business, they need someone with a liquor license. Without that, they can't sell 75% of the revenue that night. So, I don't think they need to be here to say that.
Okay, and John?
Do you think it's a possibility that you could lose your job if you don't get an
It
operator's
is a
license?
possibility. I can't say for sure, but it would definitely help if I could get my liquor license. That way I know for a fact I still have a job. I mean, I talked to the HR representative at BP. She wasn't sure. They were just waiting to hear on the outcome of this meeting, whether or not, so they're just pretty much waiting to hear me. I mean, I have continued on working there, but they've always had somebody there with me with a liquor license. So they're just all waiting to hear what the verdict is here today.
Okay, thank you.
Mark, then Ellen.
Mr. Capsule, how long have you worked at BP?
I started there a little bit over a month ago or so.
Okay. And what shift are you currently working?
It varies. I bounce around. I've done closing shifts, mid shifts, morning shifts.
Do you live in town?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I actually live maybe about 10 minutes away from work, so I can walk there every day.
Okay.
I have been.
You've been walking?
Yes.
Okay.
Move that we accept Chief Wallner's denial of the application.
Got a question.
Can I, let me see if we get a second to that motion first.
I'll second.
Motion by Ellen, second by Steve.
Motion's on the floor.
You can,
Vote against it.
you can vote against it, but
Or you can state what you want it to be, so that otherwise, I have no idea.
I was just wondering.
If you don't state
Just
what,
wondering, mistakes happen, I'm not gonna say, but like, I made mistakes, we all make mistakes, right? And you're understanding what your mistakes are. And I don't feel that it's my place to be in the way of you having a second shot, right? And that's, I feel like you're trying to work your way up, right? And this is a first step. And then, in a year, there'll be a second step, right? This is just, a notch in that. So I understand why the chief denied it, because there is the formula that they go by. And, you missed a few things. You have stuff in your background. So like, it makes sense that it was denied and that you're here appealing.
I understand that.
But I don't feel that we should be stepping in for something 5 years in the past for you working your way up. So I would be motioning that we would approve your appeal.
Well, you can't.
I can't.
You
I'm saying
can't.
I wouldn't be. For Jolene. Jolene was asking.
Yeah. I would like to say, I understand all of that, but the fact remains, he did not tell the truth on the application.
I understand.
He didn't. Right there, that's the game changer. I understand that he hasn't had.
For the denial.
Yeah.
I understand.
From my point of view, having worked on drug-free communities and alcohol for several years, the fact is that, yes, you are trying, and that's terrific, but the fact remains you cannot come in and not truthfully answer the application. It's the same thing for any business trying to get an alcohol permit. If you have broken the law and sold to minors, which does happen in Ripon, and you do it in a certain period of time, you should not be allowed to have a liquor license. You should not lie on the application. And that's where this turns for me.
I agree. But in the cases for the business, like, we get those and we talk about them and like we deny them, and then there would be like a follow-up to it. So like the denial happened with the chief and we are the follow-up to it. And, the recognition that there was an omission or a lie, whatever it might be. So, anecdotally, like I have filled out an application and I have something on my background that I didn't know was there, and it has come up in a job. And somebody said, why didn't you put this on there? And I didn't know that it was there. So I, understand parts of it.
I'd just like to follow up with Jonathan, and I agree 100% with everything you said. And if I understood what Chief Wallner said, just say, for instance, we would approve his operator's license, and he sold to a minor, and so then we know for sure that he did make a mistake and it would be revoked. So again, I'm in favor with you and giving a person a second chance. I think he wants to work, he needs to work, and
Mark.
I would just like to point out that I think that some of the confusion, maybe from William's side and also from, us having this debate here. According to Chief Wallner's letter here, it says, do you have a pending arrest or have you ever been convicted as a juvenile or adult of operating a motor vehicle while under the influence of an alcohol or controlled substance? You answered yes to that with a, which was then a felony. That goes to the guideline number 1, which says that any person who has been convicted of a felony unless duly pardoned does not qualify for an operator's license. I think that part is probably the most to the recommendation of the, or not the recommendation, but the actual denial of the operator's license. But I don't think, to Jonathan's point, that just because it was denied under this guideline, that doesn't necessarily mean that we as a body are required to follow this. This is still just a guideline. These still are just a recommendation letter. So I wanted to point that out. I did want to point out that the language could maybe be slightly more clear in this, and I don't have the actual application in front of me. Maybe there needs to be a time limit put on it, or some other extra language about what is specifically a felony, what is not. I know the argument could be made that it's on an individual to understand what the charges against them are, whether they're misdemeanors or felonies. But I've read some legal documents, and you know, reading some of this stuff, it just can melt your brain a little bit. And if you don't know exactly what the classifications of things are, it can be hard. So I just wanted to point out that if by answering yes to the question, you did say that you did have a felony, and that under the guidelines that would disavow you from being able to get an operator's license, but you did then go and take the extra step. You wrote a letter to us. You're here tonight. I just wanted to point out those as kind of the facts in front of us. And I also just wanted to ask you, how do you feel that your coworkers, if you were unable to get your operator's license, how would you feel, or how would they feel if you continue to work there? Obviously, you know.
Kind of hard to say, because right now they're working extra hard right now to make sure someone's there, or they're there with me while I'm working. It's kind of hard to say. I'm pretty sure they wouldn't be real happy if I was denied, but they probably wouldn't make it an uncomfortable work environment if I was still able to keep my job.
And how would you feel if your denial was repealed by this body, if you were able to get your operator's license?
I'd be really happy about that. I'd be able to relieve the stress for everyone working there, and it would make for a happier work environment. It's be happy for all parts around.
Thank you. That's all.
Does anyone have further questions for William?
I just want to say, one thing you're doing, you're selling alcohol. None of this has anything to do with you selling alcohol, correct? I mean, it was illegal drug use.
Yes.
So, I mean, you're not, have you cleaned your, I mean,
yes,
I guess you know what to do. You're clean right now, everything's good, you're needing a second chance.
I was on probation for 4 years. I've been clean the whole time, and I've been staying out of trouble. Haven't been in trouble ever since I was released from jail. I've been minding my P's and Q's and listening to the law and everything else. Like I said, I'm too old to be dealing with all that kid stuff anymore.
Anyone else have questions for William?
Can we clarify, Chief, what the felony conviction is, just so there's no misunderstanding?
William, if you'd like to have a seat. Thank you. Chief?
So certainly he can correct me on this. I don't have the record in front of me, but I believe the fourth offense OWI would be a felony. Then the possession of the two controlled substance possessions that you see on the back page, March of 19 and April of 19, I believe those are both felonies as well. Correct?
Yes.
There's 3 felonies.
Great.
And for clarification, the question that you said on page 2 about having the arrests or pending arrests for operating motor vehicles under the influence, does that specify felony arrests or just arrests?
No, arrests.
So it's any arrest.
That I think needs to be clarified, and the law is about substantially related. So we have not only the decision to operate a motor vehicle fourth offense, we also have these other 2 decisions, are they substantially related to the activity of being responsible to deliver or sell or handle?
Possession.
Yeah. Just clarification for the council.
And another question for you is kind of an opinion question. Do you feel it's good practice to have someone with this background as an operator or a seller of alcohol? And this is a question for everyone internally.
You know, my opinion is one thing, but I have to go based on the guidelines. So the guidelines that are in place, we have guidelines in place so that there's consistency across the board when we evaluate an applicant. It's not up to me to decide whether this applicant is a good fit or not to get a license. I go strictly by the guidelines, okay? So that's not my place to make that call. I go strictly by what the guidelines are. And in this case, based on the guidelines, I had to deny this applicant.
I just want to make sure I really understand an operating license. So again, to handle alcohol, to sell it, so if you're handling it and you happen to steal it, obviously the business owner is going to notice that, and that's, stealing. If you're going to sell it to someone, that's about checking their ID. Is there a concern that someone can sell it to themselves? Is this a concern here?
No, not in this particular case. This particular applicant is not on probation. He doesn't have any restrictions. He could go out and have a beer tonight if he wanted to do that. There's no restrictions on this particular applicant about consuming alcohol. He can't do it on premises while he's selling, obviously. But for him personally, there's no restriction in his life right now that restricts him from possessing or consuming alcohol. Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, I guess so operator's license simply means he gets to handle it and he can sell it.
Correct.
Does this have anything to do with a driving operator's license?
No. You don't need a valid driver's license to have an operator's license.
Okay.
Doug?
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, can you tell us about how long ago these guidelines were developed? Or when have they been last looked at?
Go back quite a way with Chief Lickett.
Yeah.
I'd be guessing.
Prior to 2017, when I became chief, so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mark?
I have a quick question for William. Do you know what your employer's guidelines are for your responsibilities for selling and being an operator within your employment?
What they have me do is make sure I check every ID that comes into the store. Everyone that doesn't look old enough, well, if they look old enough or not, I still scan every single ID. They expect me to be courteous, sell to them, card them, and stock the shelves with the liquor on the shelves, put the beer in the beer cave. And that's roughly about it.
Do you know if your employer has any restrictions or reasons why you might deny someone a sale?
Underage.
Underage, yeah.
Besides that very obvious one, is there anything that you would, if you had your operator's license?
If the person is too intoxicated to even buy alcohol, if they come in smelling of liquor and stuff, we're not allowed to sell them anything. We have to deny them. And if they start becoming obnoxious, we have to kindly ask them to leave. If not, we would call the police.
Okay, thank you.
I have one similar question for you. Was your employer aware of your background when they hired you?
I did the background check and everything else, and they still gave me the job and everything else. They looked through my background. I actually got a copy of my background check when they went through it. And they still gave me my job after they looked it over.
Any further questions or discussion? Again, thank you. You can sit down.
Could we have a roll call?
We will. One last time, any questions or discussion?
I got one more question, I guess. He mentioned that when a customer comes in, they scan. I haven't been carded in years, so. Does that automatically go through, and then if it's underage or if it looks, then it beeps it? So it's not like the person can look at it and go, oh yeah, all right.
No.
Okay, so it's an automatic scan?
Yep.
Good. Thank you.
We used them at the fair.
Did they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any further questions or discussion?
People at the fair.
Once again, any further questions or discussion?
Can you repeat the motion, please?
Motion to accept Chief Wallner's denial of the operator's license.
So a positive vote upholds the denial. A negative vote will open it back up for a positive motion. Do we have roll call vote, please?
Iverson? So yes is upholding.
Yes is upholding the denial.
Schatzinger?
No.
Reamer?
Yes.
Gallops?
No.
Benkert?
No.
Gotsky?
No.
Sorensen?
Yes.
Split?
No.
Motion fails 5-3.
Are there any other motions on this discussion?
Make a motion that we approve the appeal.
I'll second that motion.
The motion is made by Jonathan. Any discussion on this motion to approve the appeal and allow the operator's license? I will just give my 2 cents that while I commend William for coming forward with this, and I commend you for cleaning up your lifestyle, I feel that actions have consequences, and denial of this license would be one of those consequences. It would possibly hinder your job opportunities, but there are other jobs, and we need to consider the types of people that we issue these licenses to and the possibilities of any issues and the best practices of issuing these licenses. Those are my 2 cents. Jolene.
So my colleague just asked if you scan something, it beeps it. It doesn't allow, so if you scan your license, it doesn't allow you to then move forward with the transaction. Isn't that what was just stated?
Correct.
So what we're alleging, if he was going to do something wrong, is that he would allow someone to not go through this system. Is that what we're saying?
No.
No, but that's what, but no, the mayor just said if he could misuse it.
No, I said that we have to consider the types of people that we allow to have these licenses.
Right. You
These
said that
these licenses are a privilege, and we have guidelines for who should have them.
I heard that.
And he does not meet those guidelines.
But you said we should consider how someone could misuse it. So my question is, how could someone misuse it?
No, I said we should consider the types of people with their backgrounds.
I heard that.
And
The issue here are the 3 points that the chief talked about. For me, it turns on the fact that he was not truthful in filling out the application. There's a reason these guidelines are in place, and that's what the chief was following, and that is what I am following. Alcohol and substance abuse are huge problems. It's great that William is turning his life around, but the fact remains, he is turning his life around, but he was still untruthful in filling out this application, which was part of the denial process. I think we are going too far afield with whether he's going to sell to people or not. That is not the issue here at all. It is his application.
And just to support that, either omission or untruthfulness, either way, it was not a complete complete proper application.
Correct.
And he does not meet the guidelines for the criminal history for those who we allow to sell alcohol in the city.
I understand both your arguments. I was responding to the mayor's statement that we need to consider how someone can misuse it. And so it became my question to my colleague, because
I don't believe I ever said.
this is what I
that he-
heard. So I guess what you're saying is you do not remember stating that.
I do not remember using those words.
Okay, I understand.
Any further discussion?
I understand he lied on the application. Difficulty on him getting a job, it seems like he's found his place. I mean, if we use the standard that someone lies in their job, we'd have to get rid of most of Congress. So,
Well, yeah, that would be okay.
you know, I mean, let's, you know, you gotta be, he was trying to get a job. It's not like he was trying to do something terrible. He's trying to keep a job. He wants to work. It seems to me he's been clean for 4 or 5 years, or hasn't been caught in 4 or 5 years, depending on which way you want to look at it. I prefer to look at it that he's cleaned his act up and he's had a good life. Everyone deserves a second chance. It sounds like he's comfortable there. I think he could be an asset to the company, and I sure don't want you to make us look stupid if we do this.
Agreed.
Don't screw up.
That's the second chance argument. 4 WIs, this would be a 5th chance. Plus other arrests. It just, I mean, like I said, I commend him for cleaning up his act, but there are other jobs that I feel would not have this issue. And if you do lie on an employment application, that's grounds for instant termination, whether it's a lie or an omission. Any further discussion? So the motion is to approve the appeal and allow the operator's license. Roll call, please.
Iverson? No. Schatzinger?
Yes.
Reimer?
No.
Gallows?
Yes.
Denker?
Yes.
Gatsky?
Yes.
Sorensen?
No.
Split?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-3.
All right. Moving on is the labor agreement between the city and the Ripon Professional Police Association. This was negotiated by, go ahead.
I would move that we accept the labor agreement, which is a 3-year agreement. It's a very fair contract.
I'll second.
Motion by Ellen, seconded by Jonathan. Any discussion? Or Adam, do you want to touch on anything?
Yeah, so you have a staff report. I'll just add a couple things. So the union negotiating team met with the union representatives in early July or so to negotiate what is now a 3-year term. The contract is in your packet. The main points of consideration were insurance and changing and shifting that insurance to the standard of 88-12 split and adding dental coverage. There's an increase in uniform allowance. There is a change to a carryover payout of sick leave, additional language on bereavement leave, and then wage adjustments 4% per year over the 3-year term of the contract with a 2% residency increase. So you saw that if you look through the wage scale in the back of the contract. The overall anticipated cost of the contract in terms of wage increase over the 3-year period is $95,404. So we've gone through and kind of estimated that out, about $13,000, $14,000 in year 1 after some transitions and adding and subtracting staff, and then looking at $41,000 approximately every year after that. So that is kind of the totality of it. The union has met and ratified the contract.
Any discussion? One last time, is there any discussion on this motion?
Chief, you know, we're talking about the labor agreements. I assume that you support this? I mean, I guess we're here to,
So I am exempt from the union negotiations, and that is done on purpose. You know, as the administrator of the police department, certainly I have discussions with the powers that be, both on the union side and in the city side, but I am purposeful in staying out of that negotiation. That is between my union members and the city. So there's myself, captain, and then my 2 administrative assistants are not part of the union. Everybody else in the department is part of the union, so, but I am not really involved in that negotiation. But I will say in my review of it, I don't see anything in there that jumps out to me that is contrary to, or that I would have a difficult time with. We have a very good relationship between the city and the union. We work very hard on that, and Adam does a nice job in communicating with them, with the union, and the union president, Sergeant Borkenhagen, also communicates well with Adam as well, so I'm comfortable with the agreement.
thanks.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, could we have a roll call vote?
Split.
Yes.
Sorensen.
Yes.
Skotsky.
Yes.
Thinker.
Yes.
Gallops.
Yes.
Reamer.
Yes.
Schatzinger.
Yes.
Iverson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. All right, moving on. Next item is to review and hopefully approve a $5 million financing proposal. This proposal is for a $5 million loan to help with capital projects that we've completed and some that are upcoming. This money will go to refill some of the capital fund deficit created mostly by the State Street project and the Murray Park Trail and Senior Center costs. What's that?
Tigert Street Bridge.
Oh, and Tigert Street Bridge, which is still underway, as well as giving us some operating funds to start the DPW project. 4 proposals were requested, 3 were returned, with the staff recommendation.
Like a bridge loan until we can go out for bonding. And I would like to move that we accept the proposal from Horicon Bank, which offers semi-annual payments over the course of 2 years as an interest-only loan.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Motion by Ellen, seconded by David. And just for expanding on the bridge loan, if you're not familiar with a bridge loan at home, you might have heard of construction loan. We take a short-term loan until we have all the bills for the major projects, and then we refinance everything into one loan, and we're all done with that. Any discussion on this matter? John?
Do we know offhand how much is going to like the State Street project and versus the DPW?
Yep, so there's about $1.2 million that's refunding projects, and then there was 1.2 to 1.4, depending on where Tigert comes in and when it comes in. But then the rest, so about $3.5 million will be for the beginning of DPW.
When we do go out on bond for the DP, will that other 1 point whatever?
It'll be refunded as well into a larger package or a different issue as well. So it'll sit out there and then be refunded. The longer term strategy for funding the DPW garage will include USDA financing and other things, so we have to work through that with Ellers. So their recommendation was to put this in place for the time being and then refund it later with maybe multiple bonds or a couple different options. So.
Lower interest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any further question or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of accepting the Horicon Bank proposal for the $5 million financing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is approved. Thank you. All right, moving on to our last agenda item. Discussion of a request to change ATV, UTV hours of operation under ordinance 13.35.020E16. A formal request has been put forth by the Country Roads ATV, UTV Club, and they're requesting a change in the hour operations from 7 a.m. until 9 p.m. to 4:30 a.m. to essentially midnight, 11:59 p.m.
Let me first applaud John Ernst for bringing this to our attention, because if citizens don't let us know what issues they are interested in, we don't know. We cannot read their minds. That being said, this request has not been made in good faith. When John first came to us, he suggested some other hours earlier in the morning and then maybe until 10 o'clock at night. When I saw 4:30 to nearly midnight, I will not tell you the narrative that went through my head. I want to again remind the council and remind the ATV and UTV folks that you do not pay registration for your vehicles to ride on public roads. Cars and motorcycles pay a registration fee with the state, which in turn then assists in maintaining those streets, that infrastructure. You pay no such registration fee. You pay the DNR. That money does not come back to local municipalities or the state for road maintenance, for infrastructure maintenance with regard to that. I have people who have complained that they want to sleep late on Saturday mornings, which is their only day to sleep late, and if UTVs and ATVs are waking them up on Saturday mornings at 7 o'clock. So I find that the request for hours it's unconscionable. I don't know if you're asking for twice as much as you really want and hope that the council will amend the hours and extend them. I'm flabbergasted that this went from maybe, 5 in the morning until 10 at night, 4:30 in the morning to almost midnight.
John?
I got two questions. One is, what are the hours for the township of Ripon? And then, is there a state of Wisconsin statute that limits the time that they can run on the roads?
To answer your question, I believe Chief Wallner did the research, and the town of Ripon currently mirrors the cities, so 7 till 9. And there is no state statute that I'm aware of that would govern when an individual can operate their ATV, UTV on the road. That is left up to the local municipality to set those parameters.
Okay.
I would just counter Ellen. I would say, I don't know. My neighbor has an ATV, so ignoring his ATV, there's probably an ATV that drives down our street, I don't know, twice a day. It's quieter than half the cars that are going down our street. I mean, it's quieter than my first 4 cars I ever owned. It's cool. It's quieter than most trucks. They're, I mean, if I'm picturing, like my son, if he wanted to have an ATV or a UTV or something, I would rather have him have that than a motorcycle. I would rather have him have that than being like the people that are driving their motorized bicycles 25 miles an hour down Highway 23. So I think they're quieter than most things. They take up less parking spots than half the vehicles on the road. you know, I would say gas mileage is probably comparable, but, so I don't see an issue. And I would say the time, I don't know, I guess, I agree, it changed. To me, I read it as partly maybe me, when I sent in my recommendation, I think I dropped my time even lower than what they said. And then it might have been a reassessment based on shifts at Alliance, so I don't have an issue with the time.
Since you brought up the sound, I will give you the statistics and science behind the sound. ATVs are produced between 85 and 100 decibels. Automobiles between 49 and 65. Motorcycles, according to federal law, at 35 miles an hour, have to be 84 decibels or lower. So instantly ATVs are louder than motorcycles are allowed to be. Whether or not that's a motorcycle with a bad muffler, that's outside the operating law. And just for the science of decibels, it's a logarithmic scale. Every time you go up 10, going from 70 dB to 80 dB, you've increased the sound more than you'd think. Every 3 decibels is doubling the sound. And just for other considerations, large arena rock concerts are 85 to 110 decibels. And if you look at the recommended exposure time to those decibels, it is in the minutes. So people operating ATVs are not going to have, while they say they are quieter, it is not the case. And these are statistics from many different state governments, federal governments. And the volume is an issue that I have heard from my neighbors. People come to me and tell me that they are not happy with the volume. And I will point out that when we made this ordinance, we gave the operating hours were a major concession for the people that did not want to have ATVs on the street. Limiting those hours garnered enough support to get this ordinance passed.
I don't know if anybody else had their hand raised. So, I don't know enough about the standard to say, so I would agree that that's the standard. Just a reference, right? The generators that we work on, there's no set dB level for a generator like there would be for an automobile or an ATV, right? So our generator, when we don't put a muffler on our generator, it's like 120 dB. And so the way we sell against other people is we sell, we put a much bigger muffler on our generator, right? And then we were able to drop our dB to 65. So I would say there's a potential that standard is referencing what like the UTV and ATV limit is. And then in general, in practice, they're putting different mufflers on. Because there's no way that my neighbor, when he starts his ATV or his UTV up, is at a 90 dB. It's impossible. I understand like the scale, but like it is as quiet as my car. And maybe that's not the case for all of them. And there's the potential that there would be some coming through town and they would be at the 90 dB level. Don't disagree. But I think in general, there are probably muffler packs, and maybe you guys know more about it, but they're going to be cutting the dB level lower than what that's.
Jolene.
I wish that we could require that. I mean, this is so, I don't know what we can do from a city to say that the state needs to take this on, because it's only going to become an issue all across more and more municipalities, townships, and I don't a statement or individually we reach out and we say we do want fees, to my colleague's point, for ATV, UTVs to be paid, and that we want sound regulated, because as much as I can agree with you, Jonathan, I've also just on Saturday was downtown, in the downtown, and some ATV, UTVs stopped and people couldn't have a conversation. They were so loud. It was disruptive, concerningly disruptive. And so here's what's hard. What's hard is I want people to be able to, my thought process is, I want them to be able to get to and from work. And if that is indeed the case, I wish that there were people here that would utilize that would speak on their behalf, that would maybe that is something, I don't know, asked about, or if you know in the club, if they could make a statement as to that they would actually utilize that to, I mean, if this is about supporting our employers, we don't have any employers here, and I didn't receive personally any employers saying they wanted this, so that's hard for me. I will say if it's about supporting people, you know, we had the Friday night concerts that are incredible in downtown Ripon, you know, Craig is here, that downtown Ripon puts on. If it's about people being able to go to our establishments such as Canoe that stays till 10, I understand people enjoying the concerts and supporting community till 10. I just get really nervous that, you know, after 10 p.m. Often is when issues come up. People are going to excessively drink. It's often later in the evening. If they're going to, and then be on the roads, I get really, really hesitant. I can see a case for right now until 10 if it's about those types of things, again, supporting businesses. But again, I don't have a business here making a statement, and I don't have anyone saying that they're going to work making a statement, unless that has been the case and I don't know it. And so I'm on the edge here, I will admit to people, because I want to be supportive. I know people that enjoy them. My neighbors are on the fence about this. And so I like personal freedom. So from that, I'm leaning towards also that way. I will say that my husband is from Germany, and Germany, there is precedence there in that country. There are times when you can't operate a lawnmower even, because that they are seeing the benefits to a population when you have quieter times. So I guess I invite the people that are here to speak to that.
Can I answer some of the questions? A couple of the questions I had, obviously, when it comes to sound, I would personally love to see that statistics, because I found statistics that show the exact opposite, that a Harley Davidson, I promise you, is louder than a side-by-side. I can 100% guarantee that. The other aspect of people aren't able to come to work here because they have to get up in 8 hours to go to work. So I don't think they can actually come here because with the shift starting at 5 a.m., they have to get up at 4:30, 4:15 or whatever to start getting ready for work. When it comes to the noise, I've heard multiple people say that they have absolutely no issues with it at all. I talked to my neighbors have no problem. And I'm going to be honest, I ride this side by side probably more than anyone in the city. So, I mean, I ride it to and from. I don't know what rock concerts you're going to either. My kids ride my side by side probably 2 or 3 times a day, and their hearing is just fine. So they ride my side by side to and from school, to and from the gas station, to literally everywhere. I'll take it all the way to Berlin to my hunting land. They just sit there and we crank some tunes and we just have fun. So they have no problems at all with it. My kids are 8 and 5, so they have no issues with it. I've talked to other people I was at the concert actually on Saturday night or on Friday night. I talked to multiple people. They said they're all in favor and they wish they could have rode their side-by-sides down here. Music gets done around 10 o'clock. I mean, I understand the noise and everything, but again, I understand the whole they don't get licensed through the city. I get that, but I mean, there's not so many that it's going to cause such a disruption when it comes to, you're not going to have people doing side-by-side parades at 4:30 in the morning. The main point for this is to be able to get to and from work. They should have the ability to do that. They pay tax dollars to be here, they work here. These are the companies, the top 5 organizations here that have all their shift hours, so they want to get to and from work. Honestly, I just think this as, why are we any different than all these other cities? I have 30 cities I've contacted. They all have earlier hours. They all have later hours. The counties have earlier hours. The counties have later hours. Why is Ripon being different? I mean, let's just be universal and agree to these extended hours so that we're not the one that people have to go around or have to say, well, at least we're not Ripon because you can only ride your side-by-side for a couple hours. Let's be universal across the board and agree. Obviously, there's no specific state, ordinance or law, but everyone is earlier, everyone is later. Why are we being different? That's all I have to really say on it.
I do have a question. I do have a question for you on this sound.
Yeah.
How would you feel if your neighbor was mowing their lawn with a riding lawnmower at 4:30 in the morning with the same volume as an ATV?
While I would be a little irritated about it, I would also understand that he's probably got stuff to do, that he needs to, get that stuff done before work. I'd be irritated, yeah, but I'd also be like, okay, gotta get his stuff done.
You're nicer than 99% of the people I know. Dave?
Oh, thank you. My only question is, the way you phrased a couple things here, I was wondering, they never really brought up any information on, that I can remember, that you have to be a licensed driver to drive these things. You said your kids can take them to school.
They ride in the back, sorry.
Okay.
You have to be
All right,
16.
well, I'm just looking at, younger kids saying, well, yeah, it's okay to drive it to school.
You have to be 16 years old, and under the age of 18, you have to wear a helmet.
It's in your ordinance.
It is okay, because that was before I was here.
And then also just to address that change of hours, when I originally started it, I was just looking at other cities, and then once I started researching the cities of the hours or the companies, that's why I said, oh, it should be, I originally wanted 5, but I said, well, we can't do 5 because that's when Alliance and Walsworth starts, so I need to move it up to 4:30 so that they can, I didn't call all the companies at that point. That's the reason why there was that slight change.
What are the hours outside of Ripon?
Waupun is 5 to 11, Marxand is 6 to 11, Princeton is 5 to midnight, Dodge County is 5 to midnight, Rosendale is 5 to 10, if you're, Green Lake is 5 to 10, so they're all earlier, they're all later.
So it's to get people back and forth to work?
Yes. And actually, I do know that Waupun actually just changed as well because the prison opened up at, I believe, 6.
Prison opens at 6. They went 5 to midnight.
They went 5 to midnight because the prison opens up at 6.
Because there's businesses that start at 6 and there's businesses that...
Okay, so you're wanting a 5:30, obviously, because of the 6 o'clock. 4:30 because of the 5 o'clock start.
Exactly.
All right.
And those are the two biggest ones was Walsworth and Alliance. Who, pretty sure everyone knows someone who works there.
And what prevents the people who work at these factories from taking their car to work as opposed to an ATV?
Absolutely nothing. But what's preventing them from walking or riding their bike? Should we just ban all vehicles then? I mean...
Walking and riding bikes are very quiet.
True.
But better than driving a car.
It's also, you should be able to ride whatever vehicle you really want to work, honestly.
Any licensed vehicle?
Any licensed vehicle, 100%.
Licensed, to her point.
With the DNR.
With the DMV that pays to the roads.
So there is actually a small study, or the small point of it, and you can help me with this, but any vehicle, every vehicle that's registered with the DMV, they provide gas reimbursement.
Gas tax. Gas tax.
Every ATV, UTV or UTV that's registered in the state, 25 gallons per year of tax money is put into an account, which comes back to law enforcement. It's all allocated by the state. In fact, last year we got it doubled from $750 to $1.5 million to go back to law enforcement. The Wisconsin ATV Association has to lobby the state on how to spend that money. So through registrations and through the gas tax, that money goes back into law enforcement, trail maintenance, or whatever. So.
I wish I would have Googled this before I got here, but I'm hoping that you can be knowledgeable. I understand that you probably don't want this, but are there any municipalities that are able to put a sound limit, and I say this because I'm not saying to chief that you need to go out and patrol that, but it could give some teeth if there is a nuisance, particular individual, let's say, that is there?
It's in your ordinance already.
Yeah,
Your ordinance calls for stock exhaust. Stock exhaust. If there is a non-stock exhaust on a four-wheeler, it's not allowed to be on your roads. And that's a county-wide ordinance. That's a statewide ordinance, even on the trails. You have to have stock exhaust. If you get stopped by the DNR on a trail, if you don't have stock exhaust, it's a fine. And you can be required to remove that machine from the trail. Stock exhaust is a requirement, it's in your ordinance.
But real quick, weren't we saying that they're made louder, and then we were also saying that you can add things that make them quieter? So wouldn't in some cases we want them to be made quieter?
I'm not aware of
Is that
anything
what
to
you were
make
just,
them quiet.
wasn't that kind of back to your
I was
question?
saying, like, I'm assuming ATVs, when you're ordering it, you're able to, customize in some way, where you can customize to a stock exhaust that is a lower dB from, you would have a unit that has cruise control and a unit that doesn't have cruise control. You'd have a unit that had a 30 dB reduction and a unit that had a 50 dB reduction. And that would still be a stock exhaust. I think the ordinance is reflecting like people that would put like, on trucks, like glass packs on old trucks and stuff like that. Like you can't do that, right? So you can't, chop off your muffler on the ATV, or you can't add, something like a Harley exhaust to make it actually rattle louder.
They make aftermarket ones that are quite a bit louder, but if you're gonna ride them on trails or on the road, you can't have it. It's against the law. And we purposely do that. We don't want to be a nuisance, a loud nuisance. You want to pass by, stop in, patronize, go to work, come home from work. That's it.
I rode off-road motorcycle quite a bit, so there's a lot of these same conversations that happen on state and federal lands for being able to use off-road motorcycles there. And one thing that I see has changed probably over the last 6 years or so is the AMA, the American Motorcyclist Association. Whenever they have a sanctioned event, whether it's a fun ride or a race or a scenic tour, they will check every single bike at that event. And so that is driven from the clubs and organizations themselves. And because sound is such a perceived phenomenon, it is very hard to quantify with numbers. What they've done, just as an informational, is they have you take your motorcycle and go full throttle, and they measure it a yard away with a stick and a sound meter. And so whatever your opening is, they measure a yard away. And I believe right now, it's somewhere around 92 or 95 decibels is the maximum you're allowed for an AMA event.
At full throttle.
At full throttle. Now, to Jonathan's point, at full throttle actually changes how an engine will respond. So when it's loaded down and driving down the road, you don't only have engine noise, you have tire noise, wind noise that are contributing to the overall sound energy, and that's what some people perceive. So to have a limitation, or to, if we wanted to codify something in an ordinance, we would have to be very specific in the way that we measure that. The federal law measures at 35 miles an hour, and I think you have to be 25 or 30 feet away. So that kind of goes to show you, if it's 85 or 80 decibels and it's 30 feet away from you going past for a brief moment of time, that's still pretty loud, but just for a short amount of time. Versus, 95 decibels when you're riding a motorcycle for an hour and it's right there behind you. That's even louder because the time exposure. So if there were any ordinance or change to our ordinance where we wanted to have sound, some sort of sound limit, it would be very difficult, but it would also be very important to have that standard, or to look at what other people are doing as standards, so that we can use those effectively, because I think it's quite easy to game, if you just set something and say, okay, this is what we're gonna measure, or if we're gonna say stock exhaust, well, I don't know what a stock exhaust on anything is besides, the motorcycles that I own. So I think it's starts to become a question of, okay, what are you intending to enforce, then how do you actually enforce it? And it gets really muddy if that's the push from the citizens and the body. I know that's not really what's on discussion right now, but I just wanted to point out that this has been ongoing and there's been lots of push. So if anyone listening or anyone in the clubs wants to see how it's being addressed from a different standpoint, look at how the AMA has been working on allowing more events in areas that are restricted, working with the Forest Service. That's one where you have to have, they test it for a spark arrestor, so you don't burn down a forest, which is pretty crucial, pretty important. But I just wanted to point that out, that there's lots of work, there's resources out there to look at, to get a better idea of what other people, what other organizations, what other areas are working on or doing to help the clubs understand what the issue is, but then also help the citizens understand where these things are coming from, what exactly are they doing and how they're measuring it and what it means, versus just saying numbers, 60 dB, 80 dB. Well, what is that? You don't really know until you go to something and have a measurement or you've experienced it yourself. So I just wanted to point that out as a point of information.
My only concern was if you go downtown Ripon on a Friday or Saturday night, try to find a place to park. It's always parked up. I don't know if it's a moot point, Bang's Pizza or whatever they're doing, but the point is we have a lack of parking downtown. So that would be something that would have to be addressed.
We have a lack of on-street parking. There's plenty of off-street parking.
Right.
And just we're not looking at the parking.
Yeah.
We're just looking at the hours and getting back to work. The concession to the parking, you guys got enough people using your parking downtown. We can park in the back parking lots. We can park wherever we have to.
Okay.
So we removed that as a concession.
Okay.
If we got somebody that can't make the walk, we'll load them up in our machine and drive them over there, drop them around the corner. We can do that.
Well, you answered my question. Thank you.
Jolene.
You need your parking.
Back to the time, again, and I know that we don't want to get too nitpicky here, but if a motion is going to be made tonight, and we could also decide, but if it's the case for working, the hours that you said our largest employee or the first shift is at 5. Mm-hmm. So theoretically, and if it's only in the city of Ripon, the town of Ripon is not, it shouldn't take anyone more than 15 minutes to get across. Be taken, but theoretically.
Didn't you say the township mirrors the city though, so if the...
Yeah, 7, it's 7 right now. So, I mean, you can't come from the township.
But if it would mirror it, they would then.
No,
But it doesn't right now.
they would have to change their
They would
ordinance.
have to change, I thought it was just whatever.
No.
Oh, I got you.
So a person could do 4:45 to, and was 11 the last?
There were, yes, they went to 11 PM.
So it could be 11:15. Not that we're gonna get nitpicky here, but I mean, if that's the case, that you're.
Technically, yeah, but also I guess they have another third shift that starts at 11 PM, so it would give them 15 minutes to get there.
Make a motion that we change chapter 13.35.20-E-16 from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. to 4:30 a.m. to 11:59 p.m.
Second.
Motion by Jonathan, second by John. I would request before we finish discussion of this evening, that we postpone the vote on this until the next meeting so we have a chance to hear from our constituents on the issue. So we can continue discussing, but I would request at some point someone make a motion to postpone discussion until the next meeting.
There's a motion on the floor.
Yeah,
You can.
Vote it down.
No, you can move to postpone the vote.
Oh.
The motion would be active at the next meeting.
I'll make a motion to postpone the vote until the next meeting.
I'll second that motion to postpone the vote.
A motion and a second.
So we're not tabling it.
Doesn't the person that
There's a
made the
motion and
motion,
a second.
What's that?
wouldn't the person that makes the motion have to postpone the motion?
No, the motion is still active. It is,
You can vote
it's
down
coming
the
up,
motion. You can vote down.
it's coming up short of tabling the motion. It's similar to tabling, but it puts a date on the vote.
So if you want it acted on tonight, vote
If you're
down.
going to table it, it's never coming back.
Motion
We're not-
No, he said postpone, Doug.
Right, I said postpone, yes.
Yeah, he said postpone.
Right.
Nobody said table yet. Shh.
No, it's, a postponed motion is now been motioned and seconded. That's correct?
Just a question. I thought earlier when Ellen made a motion and I asked if I could make a second motion, I thought the answer was no.
There are specific motions that can be made. You can table, you can postpone, but you cannot put a new motion on the floor. So this is a motion to postpone discussion until the next meeting.
We're still going to have the vote.
Yes, the vote will happen at the next meeting,
That's
or
the
we
motion
can,
on the floor.
so,
Point of order. You're saying postpone discussion, don't you mean postpone the vote?
The vote, right.
right, his motion was to postpone the vote.
Right, the vote.
Right, but you kept saying discussion, and I want clarification.
Correct, you are
because
correct.
This is odd.
It is. This is very unique.
Yes, it is.
This is very unique.
So can you also discuss next time too, or is the discussion closed?
Yes.
No, it's not closed until you vote.
Correct. Typically, we would discuss and then that motion would be made to postpone. He made it earlier than I was hoping for.
Point of order, Ludd, can the mayor running the meeting make that motion?
No.
I did not make that
No,
motion.
he cannot.
I made
He
it,
brought up the point to postpone.
I made,
And Doug made the motion.
Right,
Can the mayor do that?
Yes, the mayor can make out any suggestion he wants. The body controls the vote.
Right.
And an individual on the
Okay,
body.
as long as,
Yeah.
as long as
Yeah.
you're fine with it.
We're fine.
to be perfectly clean about this, if we want to discuss more tonight, we should vote no to this motion and have more discussion. If you're happy with where the discussion's been tonight, we discuss it more at the next meeting, vote yes. Either way, if this motion is upheld, discussion will continue at the next meeting, and the vote will be at the next meeting.
And to be clear, you mean next full common council meeting?
Correct.
Because we meet on Wednesday.
That is a workshop, that's not a meeting.
Right.
Regular schedule.
We're still in discussion.
We're discussing whether we're
Right, the
postponing.
motion, postpone.
I have,
Which we've never done before, but there are
This is new.
I've never done that before.
on the whole
This is a
city ordinance,
Robert's rules.
but if we're discussing postponing it, then we'll have to discuss it in 2 weeks.
I'd like to call the question of the motion on the table to
Oh, now we have to
postpone.
vote on that.
You don't.
We just vote.
It just forces us to vote. It forces us to vote.
We're gonna vote.
Yeah, but you could have called the question on either one,
I
couldn't you?
could have, yes.
You can call
Okay,
the question
okay.
anytime you want.
All right,
The vote needs to be made though.
so we're going to take the vote on postponing.
Yes.
If you would like to discuss more tonight, vote no. If you would like to continue discussion at the next meeting, vote yes.
I'm getting a headache.
Roll call, please.
Iverson,
Yes.
Schatzinger,
Yes?
Reamer,
Yes.
Gallops,
No.
Dankert,
Yes.
Gotsky,
No.
Sorensen,
Yes.
Split.
No.
Motion carries 5.
This will be brought up again at the next meeting. I please request that you talk to your constituents to get their feelings on this motion.
Who was the second? I only got Iverson.
I did.
Mark?
Oh, Mark.
Mark is.
Are you okay, John? Do you know what's going on?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. It's just, I don't know why we kicked the can down the road.
That was interesting.
It's just,
never done
I kicked the can down the road so we can get constituents' input on the topic. Did not want this vote tonight, but want to hear from the public. So in the newspaper, if you report on my confusing meeting. That's why. All right. So, moving on.
I just have a question. So will we have more discussion? For the sake of the ATV people, should they come back if we're having more discussion, if we have more questions?
If they would like to be here to answer questions,
Be more
yeah, definitely yes.
For more meetings after this, the next one.
All right, moving on. Project updates and staff reports. Anything from PD?
Really quick, National Voter Registration Day was very successful. We registered 41 students at Ripon College. We registered one at the senior center. We only registered one at the senior center, but we did a lot of checking for the different people coming in, making sure that they were registered and if they wanted absentee. So it was still very productive. Absentee ballots went out last Thursday, and in-person absentee voting begins October 22nd.
And Naomi will be supplying information for League. We'll be registering students at Ripon High School on Wednesday from 9:30 until 10:30.
AM or PM?
AM.
Thank you.
We're old.
Any other questions for Naomi? No? Adam?
Just Saturday, the e-cycle event at Barlow from, I think, 8 till noon. There's a map that went out, so please follow that and don't bring anything other than what's listed. If you have any questions about what can be brought, you can reach out to us either at City Hall or via social media, and we can help answer any of those questions. And then, obviously, everybody, we appreciate following the detour on Oshkosh. That went live, and begun there. That's all I have. And then Wednesday, 6 o'clock, please be here.
All right, my only communication is again, I'd like to request that you speak to your constituents about the ATV motion. We'd like to have everyone very well informed before a vote is placed. Any future agenda items or comments from council?
I noticed in Adam's report earlier, he was talking about Horner Park. And I'd just like to comment on how nice that looks. The stream bed is getting the rock and the grass. But my one concern is I would like to see the city's long-term plan to keep weeds out of that rock area and how it's going to get mowed on the sloped grassy area. That's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else?
Is anyone else freezing?
Yes.
It's really cold, I feel.
When you get old, you won't freeze anymore.
All right, any other comments? Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn, Mayor.
I'll second.
Motion by Doug, second by Mark. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned at 9:15.